Hey everyone, in this lesson, we'll look at how to request access to users' data, how to call SDK functions in the Unity code, and vice versa how to use a JavaScript function to transfer data received in the browser to Unity. First, let's understand what player authorization is for. The Yandex server allows you to save your game state, which includes level progress, character experience, and in-game purchases. Games can also be personalized based on the Yandex profile data, such as the name or avatar. This is also a way for you to ask players to rate the game, or create a leaderboard featuring player name and score. Alright, let's say I want the username and the Yandex avatar to display here. Sounds simple. But first we need to understand the underlying mechanics of making this work. First of all, Unity calls the Yandex SDK, which is a JavaScript snippet integrated into the HTML file. It requests an image, or rather, a link to the image, as well as the player's name. After that, the JavaScript sends data back for Unity to display. That's basically the gist of what we're going to learn today. That is, the to and fro of information transfers, calling JavaScript functions from Unity and Unity functions from JavaScript. This is going to be a long and somewhat complex lesson, but nonetheless an important and interesting one. The first place we go to is the Unity manual. Do a search for something like interaction with browser script. That brings us to this page in the Unity manual. This is a pretty big article, and it describes just the things we need. Calling JavaScript functions from Unity scripts, and calling Unity scripts functions from JavaScript. Alright, so what do we have here? Let's take a look. First, we need to create a plugin file with JavaScript functions, which we'll place inside the Unity project. This is an example of a file like that. Its extension is JSLIB. Let's create one in our project now. Take note that it must be placed in the plugins folder. In the project panel, create a new folder. To avoid any confusion, I'll first create a Yandex folder, where I'll then place all the scripts for interfacing with the Yandex platform. Inside this folder, I'll create our plugins folder. Now, create a new file here. It needs to be a JSLIB file. Let's locate our folder in the Explorer. Right-click it and show in Explorer. That's a quick way to access folders in the Explorer. Inside, create a new text document. I'll call it my.glib, again, to avoid confusion. This extension signifies that it's a JavaScript library. Let's start by inserting the sample code into this file. Highlight all of it. There are several functions here that take and pass different values. We'll take one and use it as the basis for our own. One caveat. Our file has an unusual extension. If you open it in, say, Visual Studio, the program won't highlight the syntax. That's why I prefer to use Sublime Text, and recommend you install it too. It's free and is often used by those who do front-end web development. Go to the program's website and click Download for Windows. It's very straightforward, just press Next several times and you're done. It's a text editor, well suited for writing JavaScript and HTML code. This is what it looks like. Drag the JSLIB file into the program and edit it here, not in Visual Studio. It'll also help us keep things clean and separate. Sublime Text will have JavaScript code, Unity C#. Or rather, Visual Studio will have C#. Anyway, paste the sample code into Sublime Text. By default, it doesn't recognize and highlight the syntax. Just go to View, Syntax, JavaScript, JavaScript. Now, all is highlighted for your convenience. Let's delete all the functions except the first one. The hello function. What does it do? It calls window.alert. You've most likely seen it in action. It's when a warning message pops up on top in a browser. This is the code that produces those messages. Window.alert. Let's run it to make sure that Unity is interfacing with our browser and making successful calls. You can also use this function for testing console.log. If display a test message in the browser, we'll be able to view it in the console this way. Let's write hello world. That's it. Don't forget to save this script. Be very careful with the brackets and their positions. If you miss a closing bracket, your project won't build. Same goes for semicolons. So watch out for those. Now, how do we call this function from our Unity code? Go to the editor. I'm going to create a new C# script. For the sake of simplicity, let's just call it Yandex. It'll house all the functions relating to Yandex. Next, let's add it to a new empty object. I'll call the object Yandex as well. Be mindful of its name, because that's what we'll use when calling the relevant functions later. Go back to the Unity documentation. This is how we write functions in JavaScript. Next comes this section on how to call these functions. You need to write this attribute DLL import and the name of the method, plus this keyword extern. That's external method. Let's copy-paste it here. Sublime Text will get confused about DLL import. Just press the light bulb icon and import the namespace. This one. Runtime, interop, services. Now we'd like to call this method. For now, we've only declared it. Let's create a simple Unity function, callable using a button. This is all just testing, to make sure the interfacing works. Soon we'll move on to actual practice, user authorization, and so on. Public void. Hello button. This method will be called upon a button press, and will in turn call our hello method here. Because this is a special method, with this specific attribute and the extern keyword, when being called it actually calls this method. This one is called on the JavaScript page. Now we're ready to test things out. Save. Let's create a button. I'll use Canvas Start menu. Right-click UI button. Let's call it. It doesn't really do anything yet, so just hello will do. Button hello. Next, we bind events to this button. Add the onClick event to the inspector, drag over the Yandex plugin, and select the hello button function. This is the bare minimum we need to test the functionality. Build settings, build. Specify the folder Unity will build to. By the way, remember the local server we created? For convenience, you can save there to then easily open and test the build on your computer. Drive C, XAMPP, Tox, Games, and our game folder. A word of warning. When building to the same folder, Unity overwrites the files all except the index.html that we edited. It should preserve the old version. In theory, at least. In practice, though, there is a chance it gets altered after all. Several things need to happen for that. Say you first build to one folder, then to another, and that's when it gets replaced. I recommend backing it up somewhere, just create a copy. After that, click Build. Better safe than sorry. We did make a lot of changes to index.html. The build's done. If not, check the console for errors. It's probably a syntax error in the JSLib file, because there are no hints or underlining. You just have to keep your eyes peeled. My project successfully built to the folder within XAMPP, which means we can download it from the local server now. In the browser, type in localhost/games and click the game folder. It has launched. As you can see, changes in my index.html were reverted, and all our settings for the window and screen size are back to their defaults. It's okay, we can always use the backup. Testing time. We need to check what happens when we click on Hello. I'm not going to do it yet. Let's open the console. Bring it up using Ctrl-Shift-I. Here's the console tab. This is a good tool for testing. In our script, we wrote the following line, console.log. Hello world! That should display in the console. The alert thing should also show. Press hello, and here's our alert from the script. Says, Hello world! The game goes on pause when the message pops up. Click close. The console has also produced the Hello world output. Now you know how to call JavaScript from C#. That's the process right there. Armed with this knowledge, let's move on to something more practical. Showing the name and avatar. Go to the Yandex documentation. Developer console, and then documentation. We need SDK methods, player details. As the name of the section implies, we need to get player data. This includes at least their name and avatar. In the future, we'll also save player details to the Yandex server and more. Here we have the code that lets us initialize a player object, which we'll later access to request data. We also have this code snippet that we're going to grab. What it does is, upon the game launch, it shows the user authorization window requesting access to data. There are several scenarios. The user may not be registered in Yandex Games. If they've just stumbled upon the game as a non-Yandex user, they'll see the Yandex authorization window. If they're already signed in, then they'll see a pop-up requesting access to data for the given game. This is what this code does. Let's copy it and paste to index.html. As you recall, mine got overwritten, so I'm getting the backup. This is what our index.html file looks like. We've already imported the Yandex SDK script and initialized this object, and now we can insert the code right here. If you want to correct the indentation, you can go to Edit, Line, Reindent. There's a lot going on in this script. It checks if the player is logged in or not. The outputs are based on that. What we need to pay attention to here is the var player variable. After all of this executes, this variable will store the player object, which will give us the details we need. The documentation says that this player has some properties, like getUniqueID. Self-explanatory, not that interesting. There's also getName, and one that gives you a photo small, large, or medium. This is a string with a link to the photo. I'm going to explain how to send this info to Unity. But first, let's write out in the script what exactly we're going to do with this info. We'll have some text and an image. You can create them right away. In the same place where the Hello button is. Go to UI and then Text. And the image. One thing here. Let's choose raw image instead of image. The difference is that raw image can display any texture, whereas an image component can only show a sprite texture. That's why we had to convert the coin texture into a sprite. Here any texture goes, which is convenient. We'll just download one off the internet and add it to this component. So, that'll be the icon. Let me make it a bit smaller. This is all a bit crude since we're just testing. This probably isn't the ideal location for the username and avatar, but we'll make it so just for demonstration. Now let's reference these objects. Open the Yandex script. First, we'll reference the text. Serialize field. Text Mesh Pro. Click the green plus sign to access classes from other namespaces. We'll call it underscore name text. One more field for the image. The data type is raw image. We'll call it underscore photo. Next, we need methods to populate these fields. The text one is very straightforward. Create the method public void setName with string name that it'll assign to our text. This is the method I'd like to call from JavaScript, and pass it the player's name, also from JavaScript. We need to do something similar with the image, though here things are a bit more complicated. We don't just pass a string with the image name. I mean, technically it's possible to write the image path in the text form, but we also need Unity to download this image off the internet. That'll give us the path to the image on the internet. Its URL. From there, it needs to be downloaded, converted into a texture, and then displayed. To do this, we have special code. Here. See the video description for all the big and complex things we use in this project. No need to write it all out manually. You see the wavy red line. That's due to the namespace not having been imported. Here, Unity Engine, networking, import it. So, let's type string URL. That means JavaScript will call the setPhoto method, which will receive the URL, aka the internet address of this image. After that, start coroutine comes into play. We won't dwell on what exactly coroutines are. In a nutshell, it's a method that allows execution to be suspended and resumed. We send a request to the server, saying we want to get the image. Until it arrives, the execution is suspended. Unity is still working, without any interruptions. After the image comes, the execution of this method resumes. So what happens is, we provide raw image underscore photo with the texture downloaded from this address. Right. Don't forget to make the methods public. Both setName and setPhoto. But that's not all. Next, we need to make Unity request JavaScript for these textures and strings. To do that, we need another extern method. Just duplicate it. I'll call it something blunt, to remove any ambiguity. Give me player data. Better to avoid such weird naming in your actual work, but we'll just go with it to be fully explicit as we learn. This method asks for user data. You can see the extern. Let's call it on the hello button press. And just like that. Now, instead of the hello method, the hello button will call the data request method. Now we need to declare this method in our JSLIB file. Go to the file. Copy the existing method to preserve all the syntax. Make sure there's a comma after the curly bracket. That's important. Like this, a colon function. This is what the method does. Let's go step by step, to make sure everything works and there are no mistakes. Let's start by outputting the user's name and the path to their avatar to the console. I'm going to type in player like this. So why does this name exist in the context of this script? To make it easy, think of it this way. This code, the same JavaScript code, is located in the same project as the index.html code. The player variable that's declared here serves as the container for the player object. It is saved there as a result of all this, the stuff that happens at the start of our game. After that, we can access this player, either from index.html or from here. As we saw in the documentation, the player has a name, here, getName. Copy it and paste here. For now, we'll just output it to the console, and do the same for the path to the image. Again, just copy getPhoto. In place of the size parameter, write one of these strings small, medium, or large. I'll do medium. Here, with quotation marks on both sides. Save the script. Save everything JSLib and HTML. These scripts, too. Building's a long process, and it would be a shame to get the wrong output due to unsaved changes. Back in Unity, put the text with the name and the image into the Yandex script. Let's check which method we have on the hello button. Here, it calls hello button, which then in turn calls this string. Looks good. Go to Build Settings, Build. Choose this folder. Again, to be safe, you can back up your index.html file. Great, the build's complete. If not, check the Unity console. Let's make sure nothing's broken in our index.html. Yes, everything's correct. No real point in testing this on a local server, because we used Yandex functions, and they'll only work on the Yandex platform. Add it all to a zip archive and upload to Yandex. We went through this previously. Click Select File and browse to the archive. Wait for it to upload. Once done, press Save and wait about 5 minutes. When it's ready, you'll get a clickable link. Refresh the page in 5 or so minutes. Great, we have the link, now click it. Press play. Let's see what happens when we press hello. Bring up the console using Ctrl-Shift-I. Don't worry about any red errors. If everything works, just ignore them. Right, we also wanted to see an authorization window here, at the start of the game. But we made a mistake. If you look closer at this red error in the console, you'll see it says, YSDK is not defined. It even gives us the line number that caused the error. 39. Here it is, this YSDK is an unknown quantity. The thing is, SDK initialization takes some time. The process starts here, proceeds, and when it finishes, this message is displayed in the console. That's it. The code within the brackets gets executed. What we did is we didn't wait for the initialization to complete, and instead proceeded to immediately call a function that accesses this variable. You can even see that this message Yandex SDK initialized did output, here. However, it happened after we tried to access it. Let's fix this. We're going to wrap this whole operation into the following method, function auth, to keep it short. And place this code here. Indentation leaves something to be desired. But oh well. Quick fix with raindent. Not much help. Here, we just declare the function and describe the action, but we don't yet call it from anywhere, so the error is avoided. After the Yandex SDK initializes, we can call the auth function inside these brackets. Auth being short for authorization. Calling pretty much follows the C# syntax, round brackets and semicolon, very similar. Time to save. By the way, we don't even need to make a new build. That's because all the changes we've made have been in index.html. Just go here, save index.html, and add it all to an archive again. Back to the developer console, select File, find the archive, save, and wait for the verification to complete. I've launched the game, and immediately this message pops out, saying the game is requesting access to your account data. This message appeared because I'm currently logged into Yandex. Let's try incognito mode, where we're not logged in. We get this window, which asks for authorization. You can proceed to the authorization, enter the data, and when you get taken back to the game screen, you'll see the window requesting player data. Great stuff. I'm going to agree, and then take a look at the console. Something about the style sheet. No matter. The rest is fine. It's probably due to the game being displayed in a narrower window than usual. Anyway, let's click Hello and look at the console output. Exactly what we wanted, the name, aka my Yandex username, and the link to the image. Let's try clicking it. I haven't uploaded an avatar yet. I'll do it now, just to be thorough. We're almost done here. We've learned how to make calls from Unity to the Yandex SDK, and also how to ask the latter to display player info, but so far only in the console. How do you send this info to Unity? To do that, let's go back to this section of the Unity documentation. You remember JSLib, DLL import attributes, we know all that. Down here, there's also this send message. This is the way JavaScript communicates with Unity. Here's how it works. The first thing you do is save your Unity game to a variable. Something like that. You do it using this string. Create a new variable. Go to index.html. Scroll down to, say, here, and paste this variable. It's called myGameInstance. This myGameInstance variable will serve as the container for our game that's currently running in Unity. We'll write some code here. Notice this, then, method we've already encountered it several times. It's what's called a promise. In simple terms, say you start a process, and after it finishes, the thing in the brackets executes. So once the download completes and Unity opens, that's when this code within the brackets gets executed. What we want to do is save this Unity instance object, which returns the promise, to our myGameInstance variable. Just like that, we've created this variable, which we can later access. These sendMessage methods that we'll also need later are actually attached to this object and called from there. This means that now if we go back to our JSLib file, in addition to outputting these messages to the console, we can actually send them to the game. Here's how it works. Write myGameInstance. And just copy over the rest of this line that contains sendMessage. Next, we put in the name of the object to which the needed script is attached. Go to Unity. Here you see the Yandex object. The name actually matters here. Then you call one of the functions attached to this object. In the Yandex script, you can see the setName method. Insert it here as a string. After a comma, you can also specify some argument you'd like to pass in. Here, our method is passed string name. Here, put in that player name after a comma, player.getName. That's the first thing you do, the method for the name. Now, make the same method for the image. Yandex remains, the name of the method should be setPhoto. And the string is the path to the medium photo. Alright, let's retrace our steps here. The GiveMePlayerData method is declared as extern. Right here, which makes it callable. It gets called upon a button press. It then accesses myGameInstance, which we have in JavaScript. Our whole game is basically contained in this variable. When we access it, we call sendMessage. This method first takes an object, then takes the method inside, and passes an argument there. This enables us to do anything we want by calling various methods in Unity from JavaScript. Save and build the project again. The build's ready. Add it to an archive and upload it to Yandex. It's uploaded and verified. Let's finally take a look. I've already been authorized, so the authorization window doesn't pop up. Now, when we press hello, our name and image should be displayed here. Let's see if it works. Nice. Right now it looks a little strange, doesn't really jive with the interface, and the alignment's off. But the point is, you now know how to display the user's picture. You can put it anywhere, attach it to a 3D object, for example. The name can float above the character's head. Or you can have a leaderboard if the game supports players competing online. These are all effective retention-boosting tools. Great! We've learned the most important thing for working with the Yandex platform: setting up information exchange. We now know how to call JavaScript functions from Unity, which is done using a JSLib file and a method with the DLL import attribute. We can also call Unity functions from JavaScript via the sendMessage method.